So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Sly Cooper. So let's start the series. The Owl's Retaliation. Due to the fact that it was past midnight and the majority of the Chunin monitoring the wall were asleep on their feet, the town of Konoha was peaceful. When someone touched a lone Chunin on the shoulder while he was gazing out over the forest, he turned around and was viciously kneed in the stomach. The attacker then shoved his face into the knee, causing the Chunin to drop over on the stone walkway in agony. The Chunin's eyes glazed over as the assailant gestured to one of his friends, who instantly utilized her clan's signature technique and flew through some hand seals. He then got up and left. "It's done, Naruto," the girl said. The assailant nodded and then turned to face his other friends. He stepped out into the light, tall and muscular, with deep blue eyes and light blonde hair, and he was already capable of defeating most grown men. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Once we leave, there is no going back," he said. A person with black hair and green spandex said, "Wosh. What Konoha has done is most unyouthful. Though it pains me to leave my most youthful sensei, I stand by my decision, my eternal rival." The others swiftly agreed. "As troublesome as it is, I agree with Lee. Anything to upset forehead. I agree with Shikamaru and Lee, Naruto. Munch, yeah, same, munch, here." Naruto Namikaze grinned as he reflected on all that had brought him to this point and turned to face the woodlands the first Hokage had built. One would assume that Naruto would have an affluent upbringing because he is the son of Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, but fate had other ideas and threw his life into disarray when the nine-tailed fox attacked the village. He watched from a distance as his father battled the enormous beast and saw it sealed inside his newborn sister, Yoko Namikaze. Naruto was thrilled since his family would still be together, but his happiness quickly changed when the Shinigami turned his head and disappeared with a smile. His father should have perished at that time because the price for sealing the fox was the sealer's soul. Naruto was abandoned after that. He saw how Minato and Kushina disregarded him and his need to fight over his sister, but he stayed hopeful that this behavior would soon end and that his parents would see him again. As the years passed, he became more and more hopeless, but his optimism was quickly replaced by jealousy, which in turn caused him to become angry. Growing up, Naruto only had a few friends with whom he graduated from the Konoha Ninja Academy. After joining Hinata Hyuga and Shino Aburame as genin cells under Gama Shiranui, he felt content for the first time in years, but his family life still plagued him. When Naruto finally had enough and made the decision to leave, he confided in one of his closest friends, Shikamaru Nara, and devised a plan to get away from Konoha and his family. To his surprise, the rest of his friends were waiting for him when he left, and they told him that they were his friends and that he could not possibly leave on his own, troublesome as it was, as Shikamaru puts it. The sibling of the container of the nine-tailed fox, Naruto Namikaze, grinned as he peered at the forest, which seemed to be calling to him. He then unfolded a scroll and grinned even more as he saw the words and pictures written on it. The scroll contained designs for a suit of armor, but this was no ordinary armor. It would take months to locate all the parts and even longer to actually construct the thing, but the results would be astounding. Gazing again at the owl-shaped armor design, Naruto jumped off the wall of Konoha with his friends in tow. As they went, a name came to him, a name that Konoha and the 5 great shinobi countries would one day fear. Naruto smiled upon seeing the completed item. Shikamaru had performed his duties effectively, building the ultimate armor in under 4 years. Naruto gave Shikamaru the signal to begin lowering the armor from its hanging position. It settled on the base's floor with a loud clang. After Shikamaru nodded, he put his hand on the monstrosity's head and pulsed his chakra. Naruto found the command chair inside the main body and sat down, activating the primary systems. The system was primarily powered by chakra that was gathered through special devices that absorbed the natural chakra from the land underneath, and it was activated by a pulse of his chakra. The mouth slid open to allow his passage with a loud clanking sound. As the beast came to life, Naruto erupted in laughter and flashed his chakra. He talked through the armor via the headset. He said, "Well done, Shikamaru," in a deep, robotic voice that made Shikamaru shudder uncontrollably. "Let's see what this thing can really do," he said. Clockwork walked off the ground after saying those words. When a giant mechanical owl burst out of the sky and started killing people in strange and brutal ways, everyone in the village of Deadly Poyon, no one knows why it's called that, was happy. The sky was blue, birds were chatting among themselves while squirrels conversed with one another, the grass was green, and the flowers were in full bloom. One was killed by being bitten in half, and the incredibly unfortunate villager was then dumped into a river, where piranhas devoured his remains, which is likely how the village got its name. Lightning erupted from the owl's eyes, igniting barns, which in turn burned with a fiery conflagration, killing countless fluffy, innocent creatures, like sheep. After that, he flew over the middle of the village, causing several machine guns to pop out of his underside. He then let loose a barrage of bullets on the village below, causing the residents to scream as they ran in vain to escape the hail of bullets, some of which even penetrated the roofs of the houses. Regretfully, for the villagers, some of the bullets entered a store with explosive tags. By chance, the bullets struck a barrel of these tags, setting them off. The tags started to sizzle like bacon when they cooked, and when they exploded, the store was transformed into a massive bonfire. The fact that this fire consumed everything in its path as it went from house to house is even more regrettable. "This will do very nicely," Clockwork said as he hovered over Deadly Poison's corpses. He then continued to massacre the villagers, making sure to leave one alive. "Tell the world that Clockwork has arrived, and he is angry," he said. As the somewhat unkempt villager left his office to inform the Kazekage in Suna, Minato Namikaze sighed. The information he had received was unsettling because, after all, it's not often that a giant metal bird falls from the sky and begins killing people. What's more unsettling is that the creature was sentient and seemed to be upset about something. Minato glanced at a picture on his desk, which included his team photo, the day he became the fourth, and a family photo. This final picture caught his eye, so he picked it up and brought it closer to take a closer look. This had become a ritual for him when he had a break from the evil, which is paperwork. In the middle was him holding Kushina in his lap, and on one side beside him was Yoko, who was only a few years old when the photo was taken and already looked exactly like her mother. Because of the fox in her, she was nearly unable to sit still and needed to be restrained by the ANBU in order for the photo to be taken. Naruto stood just behind the three of them. He was a perfect replica of Minato, but he was completely different from him. His eyes were lifeless, and he never smiled at home. Looking back, Minato realized that they had done a terrible thing. They had virtually abandoned him to spend time with their daughter. By the time they realized what they had done, it was too late. Naruto had already left, taking some of the most ambitious young ninjas from the village with him. His action surprised both Minato and Kushina, but Yoko handled it the best because she was so young when he departed that she hardly knew Naruto. Looking at a map of the elemental nations, Minato mused, perhaps it is for the best. "Where are you, Naruto?" He sighed and went back to his desk to retrieve more paperwork. As he started working, the door suddenly opened, revealing the former Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Minato would normally be pleased to see his predecessor, but the expression on his face indicated that he was not there to make small talk. Hiruzen yelled, "Where the hell is my grandson?" 4 figures appeared to be walking down the road that led to the land of lightning. 3 of the figures were children, and they appeared to be chatting excitedly with each other. The 4th figure just led the group in silence. Despite his composed demeanor, he was actually very agitated, as evidenced by the buzzing sound emanating from him. The 3 brats behind him were really bothering him, he sighed. "Are we there yet, Shino?" "No, you sure?" "Yes, Konohamaru, I am quite sure we are not there yet. How about now?" "No," Shino sighed once again. Because of his aberrant nature, he thought the entire scenario was completely nonsensical. He had intended to leave Leaf Village in order to find his missing friends, the only issue was that he was acting against orders. He was stopped by the Konohamaru Corps on his way out, and after telling them what he intended to do, Shino was persuaded to take Konohamaru, Moegi, and Udon. He deeply regretted his choice. A man with blue eyes and blonde hair had been spotted at Mount Ka, an active volcano in the land of lightning, according to off-duty Jonin and Chunnin. After hearing the description, Shino started packing his things and everything he would need to take care of his bugs. Shino's instincts started to warn him that they were being followed when they arrived at the international border, but before he could move, he felt a blow to the side of his face, shattering his sunglasses. As he passed out, he heard Konohamaru yell, "WHOA," and a familiar voice yell, "Dynamic entry." Shino's first sensation was a pain in his head. By concentrating only on the pain, he was able to determine that he had been hit on the side of his face. After concluding that nothing significant, like his face, had been broken, he discovered that the back of his coat was pulling him along the ground while a piece of cloth was covering his eyes. Shino was not an exception to the rule that most ninja dislike being pulled over the ground while wearing a blindfold. Since his mind was not yet focused enough to use his bugs, he readied what taijutsu he knew to break his captor's hold. Shino readied himself for another blow to the head, but the person holding him sensed that his body was preparing for action and halted. Instead, something much worse occurred. "Shino, my youthful friend. Your flames of youth burned brightly enough to wake you from the dark depths of your mind." Shino had learned to stand around Might Guy without killing him every time he opened his mouth, so he had more self-control than the other people. Since many ninja had excellent hearing, it is not a good idea to scream loudly in their presence. Depending on the ninja's mood, the person who does usually ends up on the receiving end of either a kunai or a jutsu. Besides, he knew the voice. He said, "Lee," and instantly regretted speaking since it sparked another, youthful, comment. "Whoa sh. He recognizes me, the great Rock Lee. I am so happy I shall outrun a volcanic eruption. If I cannot do that, I shall dig a hole to the center of the world. And if I cannot do that, I shall climb the tallest mountain with my MMPH." Fortunately, Lee's next words were cut short when someone covered his lips. "Lee, we appreciate everything you've done for the group, but if you say another sentence containing the word youth, I am going to hurt you in a very painful manner," a woman's voice remarked. Shino also knew this voice, but he was taken aback by the icy tone in which she spoke. After all, when was the last time anyone heard Hinata Hyuga make a terrifying threat to cause someone to be horribly maimed? In the elemental nations, Mount Ka was one of the few active volcanoes. People should not dwell close to active volcanoes, according to logic, which actually screams, "What the hell are you doing here, you moron? Go home before your A gets fried like a piece of bacon." On the other hand, some people frequently tell logic to screw itself. Many people, including his own subordinates, thought Naruto Namikaze was one of such individuals. After all, who else would construct their hideaway inside a volcano's crater? No one else can answer that. Naruto occupied his throne, which was situated within the Clockwork armor's main body. He thought back on everything he had done throughout the years. First, Naruto left Konoha. Based to his spies, he was not present in his former home, and in fact, the majority of people were unaware of his existence. In an apparent effort to locate him, his parents dispatched numerous spies and operatives. They even pulled Jiraiya away from his research to do so. Since Naruto had mostly used fictitious names and a metamorphosis for his transactions, the pervert had not been able to locate him thus far. Yoko is graduating soon. Maybe I should send her a gift, Naruto grinned. A group entered the room, interrupting his thoughts. He was ready to meet them when he noticed the additional individuals. If it isn't Shino Aburame and the infamous Konohamaru Corps, to what do we owe the pleasure of your appearance here? When Hinata replied, "NN Naruto, we found them on an R-road TT towards the M mountain," Naruto grinned and watched Shino stop himself from staring at her strangely. Understandable, I suppose. Hinata is only timid and shy around me, these days, he thought. Konohamaru said, "Yo, Naruto. How you been hanging, bro? We still smooth?" His spies had told him that the Corps had discovered a tape purportedly made by Killer Bee from Kumo, but to the dismay of the rest of Konoha, it included only extremely weird sayings and lyrics. I hope they never meet B, Naruto thought. Yes, Konohamaru, we are smooth, as you say, he added aloud. Solid, exclaimed the 3 Corps members. Make a note to buy earplugs, Naruto reflected. You wish to see us, Lord Hokage? Minato grinned as she looked up. Yes, we have a situation. Shino Aburame, Konohamaru, and his friends have all gone ing. All signs point to them leaving the village of their own free will, the 2 ninjas said as they sat down to explain. A ninja asked, what do you want us to do, then? It's simple, I want you 2 to listen carefully during your ins and travels. If you hear any rumors, investigate and report what you find. Wosh. Such a youthful request. You say something, guy. Curse you and your hip attitude, Kakashi. The academy had just ended, and Yoko Namikaze was eager to tell her parents that she passed her last exam, so she hurried home. She yelled, I'm home, but got no response because her mother was out with some friends and her father was still cooped up in his office. Yoko climbed the stairs, went into her room, left her backpack behind, and collapsed upon the bed. At last, she was able to do Mayans and become just as amazing as her dad. Yoko grumbled to herself as she got out of bed and headed to the door after hearing a knock from the downstairs door. The postman inquired, Are you Yoko Namikaze? Yeah, that's me, she answered. After giving her a package, the postman departed. After shutting the door behind her, Yoko went back upstairs to inspect the delivery. Her father's training took over, and she began immediately noting the box's dimensions, weight, and shape. Upon opening the gift and discovering nothing amiss, Yoko, a bracer of some sort was sitting inside. She picked it up and noticed that it was fastened to the bottom of her arm. When she put it on, Yoko saw a set of instructions. Aim your arm toward the target. Put chakra into the bracer. After being launched, wire can be controlled with chakra. After aiming at a plastic cup on her windowsill, Yoko gasped and pushed some chakra into the bracer. A strand of razor wire prevented the kunai from traveling too far after it flew out of the bracer's end. Recalling the directions, Yoko directed chakra into the wire and observed as it went in the direction she desired. The only remnant of the plastic cup was the kunai, which slid back into the bracer as she stopped channeling chakra. Yoko discovered a note inside the box as she looked back. Keep your enemies within range, but keep your friends close. We'll get together once more. Your sibling, N. Why did you do it? When Naruto turned around, he saw Shikamaru standing there looking bewildered, accompanied by Choji and Ino, who had the same expression. Do what? He asked innocently. You know damn well what we're talking about, Naruto, Ino replied. Why did you send your sister that weapon? Naruto turned to the window, which looked out over Mount Ka's lava flows, and sighed. He said, What do I want most, Ino? Choji responded, Vengeance. Everyone in this base knows that. Why? I am incapable of getting what I want as long as Yoko is not aware of who I am. Now that she knows I exist, she will come to me, and when she does. He turned to face the trio of Ino, Shika, and Cho, who could see Naruto grinning. I will break her. Typically, dinner at the Namikaze home was a low-key family gathering that included some ramen and laughs. Not this evening, Mom. Dad? Inquired Yoko. Yes, dear. Kushina inquired. What was my brother's name? Mizuki smiled. Orochimaru would be pleased that he finally held the forbidden scroll of sealing, even though it had taken some time and effort. Although he was concerned that his master hadn't gotten back to him in a week, he reasoned that since he was a Sannin, he could take care of himself. A boy with slicked-back blonde hair, whisker markings on his cheeks, an orange trench coat, and black goggles resting on his head was discovered by Mizuki, who was holding one of his shuriken when he heard a rustling in the woods. Four metal arms protruded from its back. Mizuki's smile widened even further, and he even burst out laughing. Well, if it isn't the fox brat, this is where you've been hiding all these years, huh? Will whatever, I'll gain much favor with my master if I kill you. He wanted to watch the life leave the demon's eyes, so he put away the shuriken and took out a kunai instead. Rather, another event occurred, Naruto Octagonopus. To Mizuki's dismay, he saw that the demon could discharge large lasers from its lips. Minato Namikaze had it all, a lovely wife, a devoted daughter, a position of authority. He had everything a man could possibly desire. As the Hokage, he had worked hard to maintain his village's prosperity without resorting to violence, and he had mostly been successful. The Kumo incident, the disappearance of the heirs, and the Uchiha clan mocker were the three main exceptions. In every instance, his village's safety was in jeopardy, yet under his leadership, Konoha emerged stronger than ever. One of the things Minato was adept at was dealing with dishonest politicians and enemy ninjas. Handling unpleasant family circumstances was one of those scenarios. They had just finished a quiet family supper when his daughter, Yoko, posed the following query, which completely upended the moment. She had inquired, "What was my brother's name?" There was an awkward quiet across the table. Minato glanced at his wife and noticed that Kushina was on the verge of tears at being reminded of their biggest shortcoming. He had to respond instead of her in order to save her the agony and heartache of talking about their long-lost kid. His name was Naruto. He would be 22, 11 years older than you are now. What happened to him, wondered Yoko. Why isn't he here now, celebrating my graduation? We don't know, he had to confess, for years ago, he vanished without a trace, along with several other clan heirs. We never were able to find out why they vanished. Minato didn't share with her their belief that Naruto had voluntarily fled the village to avoid his parents, who had abandoned him in favor of a younger sister, because he couldn't bear the thought of losing another of his children. Then I will, his daughter said, tearing him from his reverie. He said, you will what? I'll find out why he vanished, and I'll bring him home, where people love him and his family wants him back, Yoko said as she got up from the table. Kushina had begun to cry. He stopped Yoko as she was about to leave the dining room. He yelled out to her, why did you ask? Yoko turned around and presented him with a sheet of paper. Because he left me a graduation present. Naruto asked everyone gathered around the conference table, we're all clear on the plan, right? Yash. Yeah, why yes, and Naruto, solid. This plan is greasy sweet. Munch, aha, alright then, get some sleep, you all head out tomorrow. Shikamaru, how is the special project going? He asked, turning to face Shikamaru and Ino as the newly established Claw organization filed out of the room. Despite how troublesome it is, it's going as smoothly as possible. Your clones have been helpful, without them, it wouldn't be ready for several more years. I calculate that the blimp will be finished in approximately 5 years, stated Shikamaru. Very good, and Ino? How is the construction of the prison coming? Ino rose from her slouched position. The main building and sublevels are done, several adjoining cell blocks are completed, but cell block D collapsed. Upon investigating, the workers discovered an entire network of tunnels that had been naturally carved out. We sealed it up with an earth jutsu, but the tunnels remain. After they departed, Naruto turned to the restricted window that overlooked Mount Ka's main crater. Very well, just make sure no one finds out about them. We can't have any inmates escaping. After all, you are Disney, Ed, he said. They had to raise money, and Ashtown was the outcome of their scheme. He watched as massive reinforced pipes drained the lava from the crater, and the service hatches that bordered the pipes gave off an orange glow from the contents. The entire mountain range was created as a result of a battle between the four-tailed monkey and the five-tailed dolphin horse that lasted for several days. Mount Ka was special since the four-tails lava manipulation was created during the war. Ashtown was established to capitalize on the raw material produced by the volcano. Its residents extract the lava and remove the impurities. After some manipulation, the resulting metal, called volcanium, is shipped across the elemental nations. The lava is highly saturated with chakra and can be shaped and manipulated into a metal that is highly chakra conductive. Ashtown, which is carved into the mountainside, was extremely profitable for the Claw organization. In fact, it got so profitable that they were able to conceal a significant amount of volcanium used to make a particular suit of armor. Naruto would see Konoha burn with the help of Ashtown's money and their own resourcefulness, and soon after, all the other nations would follow. During their journeys, they discovered others who had been born into similar situations to his, where their relatives and loved ones had abandoned them. These individuals persuaded Naruto that all of the hidden villages were alike since, in their hearts, they all behaved similarly, and as a result, they would all receive the same treatment. His desire would come true thanks to the strategy he had just put into action. Although it had been challenging to obtain the necessary property and grounds, his cousin was able to do it at a very affordable cost. As Naruto looked out over the molten lake, he thought, note to self, thank Nagato for his contributions. Along with gaining the land, Naruto was able to reunite with an old buddy through their lucrative relationship with the Akatsuki. After caring for his dear sister, he would send what was remained of her to the Akatsuki, just as they desired. As her tailed beast was removed from her enclosure, she was in enough pain to be kept alive but helpless to resist. Oh yes, Naruto thought, the impending storm will not spare any detail. Sasuke Uchiha was not your typical genin. Having your brother acclaim your entire clan will do that. His personality, or lack thereof, had made him into something that all of the Konoha girls wanted, and for years after that night, all he could think about was him and getting revenge on him. All save one. The Hokage visited his house one evening and detailed the events that transpired, including how the Uchiha clan had planned an uprising against the village and how the elders had given Itachi the order to wipe out the clan in order to defend the village. The elders were then promptly put to death by the Hokage himself. Following that exchange, Sasuke reverted to his pre-mocker self, becoming more gregarious, amiable. He only had eyes for one, but his fangirls were thrilled because they thought he was beginning to love them. She was the one who had talked to the Hokage on his behalf and who had tried to become friends with him despite all of his objections. Because of this, Sasuke gave himself a rare smile when he got home. They were assigned to the same squad. Because Ashtown was high up in the mountains, there was always snow in the air, but only when Mount Ka was extremely violent did it hold ash. The large holes carved into the sides with an earth jutsu made sure that it never really erupted, but when it did, there was nothing that could be done about the ash. Depending on their chosen profession and the distance from the volcano, the long-term residents and miners wore medium or light clothing. On a ash day, the locals typically wore masks to protect their lungs. New arrivals typically wore heavy winter coats to cope with the cold journey. Harvesters were the most hazardous workers because they were the ones that really collected the chakra-enriched lava. Despite taking all the necessary precautions before they started, there were always a few gaps among them. Mining was a slightly risky job after harvesting. Rather than mining for raw ore and precious metals, the miners dug deep beneath the surrounding mountains to find deposits of cooled volcanium. In addition to the possibility of a cave-in, there was always the fear of mining through cooled volcanium and discovering a patch of a low, then stellar temperature. Although there is one exception, most of the mines are in good condition. Aside from cave-ins and the occasional lava patch, one mine was closed several years ago for unknown reasons. However, a strange fire occurred that killed several miners and blocked off a half-mile section of Shaft 18, and all the survivors could talk about was green fire and swiftly moving shadows. The town's management sent a patrol down later. 15 miners and 5 scientists went down into Shaft 18, but only one miner came back. He staggered into town, mumbling about thorns and green fire. The mining committee and town management ordered the mine to be shut down completely after he gave his report. They never disclosed what the survivor found, and the legend of Shaft 18 grew. Some miners claimed to have found a lost city of a race that came before all, while others said they had found a great vein of gold. As he watched the cloaked people leave the town, Soji Okita, the head of Ashtown security, set such thoughts aside. They were allegedly operatives of the town's true overlords, whom no one had ever seen but who everyone knew better than to mention aloud. Occasionally, a name was murmured, and it was Claw. A man, about 30 years old, with short-cropped black hair, blue eyes, and a height of 5 feet and 11 inches, knocked on the door as Naruto was looking out over the lava. He would have been a handsome man if not for the large amount of burnt skin covering his face and about 85% of his body, which was left over from his previous employment as an arsonist for hire. His name was Eiji Tsuburaya, and he had been recruited by the Claw because to his prior profession. He was referred to as Firefly in the criminal underground of the elemental nations, and no one knew more about fire and how to start a fire than he did. Naruto inquired, "How goes the protection?" "As good as it can, Bo. Most of the buildings were already built to survive almost anything, so that makes it easier. The ash keeps getting in, though. If it's hot enough when it settles, it could set the whole town ablaze, depending on where it lands." After starting a big fire in Suna, Eiji accepted the job to lay low after being hired to make Ashtown's buildings fire-resistant. Although his fee was somewhat high, they could afford it, and the results definitely outweighed the costs because fewer homes were catching fire on their own than before. Naruto responded, "Very well, keep working Firefly," as he turned back to face the lava flows. "You got it, Bo." Naruto considered what to do with Eiji after he turned and went out to continue fireproofing the houses. Normally, he would have had him killed to protect secrets, but Eiji had shown himself to be too precious and valuable to throw away. Perhaps Shikamaru will desire him, Naruto pondered. The door opened once more, and this time Shino was standing there with a long hooded cloak over his black leggings and high-collared blue vest that bore the claws symbol on the back, a black, clawed hand clutching the symbols of the 5 great ninja villages. "Yes, Shino?" Naruto inquired. "We have a problem, Naruto," stated the stoic user of bugs. "Our ship was attacked and destroyed by pirates on the way to the port. I can't get the product prototypes to Jungle Country without a ship." Even though they had plenty of money saved up, the captain had requested a small fortune for Naruto's assistance, so he mumbled, "Damn, do we have an alternative means of transport?" he questioned, almost fearing the response. "Thank goodness, yes," Shino answered, removing a few documents. "Choji looked through our files and chose this one." Naruto took the files, which contained copies of names and shipping information, and examined them. He identified the name, Gato, huh? He has quite a name in the underworld. Most say don't trust him. We are too short on time. If the product sits for too long, it will spoil, making the entire plan fail. Very well, contact the little midget, but keep an eye on his actions. From his records, I wouldn't put it past him to steal from us, Naruto said in a low voice, acknowledging that they were pressed for time and that Shino needed to get the product to Jungle Country quickly. Very well, Shino was off to start his aimment. Sitting behind his desk, the claw leader noticed some unresolved issues in Gato's shipping records. These included a few ships that failed to reach port, cargo migrating, and mysterious passenger disappearances that appeared normal to the untrained eye. Naruto noticed what appeared to be an impending catastrophe with his trained eye. Thinking about the issue, Naruto called in his assistant, Sakamoto, who said, "If anything happens to the product, our plan will be set back tremendously, if not stopped completely." "Clear my schedule, I'm making a trip to Wave Country," he announced. "And you, Squirt?" Kakashi asked Yoko during their first team meeting. He had brought his brats up to the academy's roof for introductions after arriving a few hours late. As he had anticipated, Sakura was a fangirl for the last loyal Uchiha of Konoha. She was exceptionally intelligent, but nonetheless a fangirl. That would need to be fixed by him. Kakashi was relieved that Sensei had spoken to him following the Uchiha clan mocker because otherwise he would have been dealing with a gloomy, melancholy emo. It seems that his dream was to find his brother and return him home. Sasuke's was rather normal. That left Yoko, who straightened up at his insistence. "My name is Yoko Namikaze. I like training, ramen, spending time with my family, and hanging out with my friends. I dislike perverts and judgmental people. My dream." After she drifted off, Kakashi briefly noticed her gently rubbing the bracer on her forearm. My dream is to find the brother I never knew, and bring him home so we can be a family again. When Ebisu appeared, Konohamaru had been following his new idol and beau for around an hour. Honorable grandson, you must come with me at once, I still need to teach you how to be Hokage at once. I don't want to go now. I want to dash. Before it was too late, neither of them realized that the youngster with the blonde tentacles had somehow positioned himself behind Ebisu. Regarding Ebisu, as quickly as he could, the younger child had jumped to the side. For a significant portion of the coast, Wave Country was formerly the hub of maritime commerce, rivaled only by Kiri and the now-destroyed Uzushio. However, since Gato's arrival, a lot had changed. The Byzine man had drained away the money, supplies, and hope of the Wave people until all that remained was crumbling, dead, or dying, leaving Wave a shadow of its former self. Covered in concealing black robes, Naruto Namikaze, Choji Akimichi, and Shino Aburame entered this depressing village and proceeded to Gato's private estate on the outskirts of town, ignoring the tears and decay all around them. The only thing that really identified them was the faded claw symbol on the back of their robes. As they left town, they noticed the enormous unfinished bridge and arrived at Gato's estate, which is situated on a small island not too far from Wave's main body but far enough to avoid drawing attention. Mercenaries moved along the estate's walls and over the gateway, and behind the walls stood the imposing structure of Gato's castle, with archaic gargoyles perched on black roofs above stained glass windows. Overall, it was a frightening architectural example. The guards glanced up from their poker game to stop the two as they got closer to the gate. Naruto could smell the sake in the guard's slurred voice as he inquired, "Wasyo Busnu, here?" "We have an appointment with your beau, under the name Claw," Shino replied, trying not to breathe through his nose. They were taken through lavish hallways until they reached Gato's lounge, which was nicely decorated with pricey rugs, paintings, and statues that exuded riches. The guard's more sober comrade called ahead before letting them through. It was the wet fantasy of any thief. Gato made them wait half an hour before he finally met them. The door opened to let the chubby midget in, and Naruto was more impressed by his choice of bodyguard than he was by their possible business partner. Behind Gato, the enormous 6-foot-tall demon of the hidden mist, Zabuza Momochi, strolled with the big sword Koburakirabocho slung over his back as he peered at them warily. Much of his body was wrapped in bandages, and it appeared as though he was forcing himself to remain upright. Naruto thought, "Looks like a recent fight." Zabuza positioned himself behind Gato as he slid into the cozy chair across from them, and the talk started. After an hour, the deal was finally reached, and Gato agreed to lend them a fast ship to Jungle Country in exchange for 50,000 in Volcanium stocks. Naruto shook Gato's hand and had to suppress a shudder because the slimy businessman had demanded a far higher fee than he had expected. If it had been cash, it wouldn't have been an issue, but the Volcanium stock market wasn't cheap, and now Gato had a good chunk of it. That would need to be altered. Naruto focused much more on the condition of the buildings and their occupants on the stroll back through the town. He reflected, "I had the same look of hope in my eyes when I was abandoned by my ever-loving mother and my father dearest not so long ago. Choji, go take a look at the ship I just spent a lot of money on, make sure we didn't get the short end of the stick." "All right, Shino," Naruto murmured softly once Choji had gone. "I'd like you to find out how much our new friend Gato is paying Zabuza Momochi," he continued, as his comrade straightened up a bit. Shino asked, peering around through his sunglasses, "Then what?" "Offer him more." When Zabuza returned to his hiding place that evening, Haku was waiting for him. He didn't anticipate seeing Shino at the table with Haku, who appeared anxious. Zabuza snarled, "What the hell are you doing here?" as he reached for his blade, choosing to arm himself rather than deal with his aching body. Shino responded, "I wanted to ask you something," seemingly unaffected by the murderous behemoth with a massive butcher knife. As Zabuza got ready to use his silent killing technique, he asked, "Yeah? What? How much is Gato paying you?" When he was going to go into "kill your A," Zabuza was interrupted by that query. He had now transitioned to Inspector mode. 25,000, why do you want to know? We will offer you 50,000. I'm listening. As the ship sailed out of Wave Harbor with his new benefactor securely aboard, Zabuza recalled Shino's final words to him as it vanished into the darkness. "Welcome to the Claw." When the door knocked, Shikamaru was sitting in his office reviewing the designs for his special project to make sure there were no design flaws. He yelled, "Enter," and Eiji Tsuburaya walked in as the door opened. "The bow said I was supposed to report to you from now on, sir," the man with the burn said. "Well, then, I'm sure I can find a place for you aboard the Wrath, Firefly," replied Shikamaru. When Naruto noticed a party leaving Wave Country and making their way to the town, he instantly hid in the shadows upon noticing the Konoha headbands they were wearing. Naruto thought, good thing the ship left already. The gang was led by an elderly man who was the customer because, based on his look and age, he was the only one not a ninja. The eldest ninja present had gray hair, a face mask, and a headband covering one eye. Naruto recognized him right away as the renowned copycat ninja Kakashi Hatake, who would have seen Naruto very immediately if he hadn't been asleep and being carried. You know who Zabuza fought, Naruto thought. He recognized the pink-haired girl as the team's weakest member right away since she lacked general strength and was always staring at her comrade, who was carrying Kakashi. A fangirl? Keep me from laughing, Naruto thought. The black-haired teammate, who had Kakashi's arm draped over his shoulder, captured the pink-haired girl's attention. Despite not having known the youngster previously, he recognized the lad's facial features and the crest on his shirt. Naruto had worked with Itachi when he was still a ninja, and the two had been friends in the academy and had gone on a few combined missions. They had just reconnected after the Claw sided with the Akatsuki. An Uchiha who looks like Itachi, must be his little brother. Naruto's focus then shifted to the group's final member, her. Yoko Namikaze, the pride and pleasure of Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, the container of the nine-tailed fox, was someone he knew well even though he hadn't seen her in a long time. Additionally, his younger sister, Naruto forced himself to watch her, suppressing his anger. Her headband was around her forehead, and she had a burnt orange jacket with a blue blouse underneath. She had black jeans, black sandals, and a kunai pouch on her left thigh. Idly, Naruto saw that she had a bracer fastened to her left arm. It seems that she chose to wear it. A second blonde female was beneath Kakashi's other arm to assist the Uchiha guy in carrying him, despite Yoko being at the rear of the group. Shadow clones? Fascinating. Naruto had surreptitiously entered the family's jutsu library on his way out of Konoha all those years ago. He had copied the notes for a number of techniques, such as the Shadow Clone Jutsu and the Rasengan, but he had not been able to obtain the notes on the Flying Thunder God Jutsu because the seals on that safe were too complex even for him. Naruto had long since mastered enough chakra control to do a one-handed Rasengan, but it still took a few seconds to execute. His Uzumaki ancestry allowed him to create roughly 70 shadow clones before running out of chakra. However, she still has a lot of chakra reserves because of her ancestry and the fox's chakra in her. She could therefore create a large number of clones. Naruto ducked away as they approached to avoid being noticed. Sasuke paused as they were walking down the street to examine the flora by the side of the road. I felt like someone was watching us, Yoko said. Sasuke. What's wrong? Nothing, I just felt, he said, fading away. Felt what? Inquired Yoko. Never mind, it was probably just the wind. You sure? I mean, last time we thought we heard something, that eyebrowlow, freak Zabuza attacked us. Don't argue with Sasuke. He's always right. Sakura's voice restored their hearing, and they started walking again in the direction of the destroyed settlement. A dome of ice mirrors had been placed around Yoko and Sasuke, and their opponent darted back and forth between them to hurl Senbon at them. The unfinished bridge had turned into a battlefield, and the mist had obscured nearly everything. The pink-haired Sakura protected Tazuna, the customer, away from the battlefield. She was brandishing a kunai, but she appeared to be on the verge of passing out from sheer fear. Zabuza and Kakashi were engaged in fight near the middle of the bridge. As Zabuza turned to dodge a kunai, Kakashi saw an odd symbol on his opponent's back. Kakashi thought, he wasn't wearing it when we fought the first time. He committed the symbol to memory and leaped back to avoid Zabuza's blade. His dog summons grabbed his opponent's arms as he did so, and as the hulking man was pinned in place, Kakashi unleashed his signature technique, the Raikiri. His Sharingan eye was fixed on Zabuza as his hand was covered with lightning. The kill was about to happen. Please, kill me, Haku pleaded. Yoko, her opponent, was split between releasing her and killing her to exact revenge on Sasuke, who had stolen some Senbon for her before passing out. Something inside of her broke as he hit the ground. Yoko had never summoned the energy of the demon inside of her, despite training with her father and godfather, both of whom were well-respected sealing masters. The fox had never responded to her inquiries or demands. In her mindscape, it had been sleeping in a prison, nearly unconscious except for the one occasion when a Yamanaka clan member had been invited to visit her. The fox had blasted Inoka with a wave of demonic power as soon as he entered the mental prison before returning to sleep. 2 days later, Inoka plunged off the Hokage monument, but no one had ever told Yoko that he had fled screaming. But now things were different. The fox had reacted to her rage when Sasuke stopped breathing. It knew he was still alive, but it didn't want to spoil the fun by telling its host. After a substantial amount of chakra was pumped into Yoko's body by the fox, she became a powerhouse for 45 seconds while Haku frantically attempted to avoid her. Ultimately, Yoko blasted her through her own mirrors and tore off her mask. Haku had never seen Yoko before because she had not had to venture into the forest to look for herbs because of Zabuza's wounds and their new friends. Haku's gaze were the only thing preventing Yoko from slamming her kunai into his chest. Eyes are windows to the soul, and Haku had a pure soul. She had never killed anyone or stolen from the poor. Her devotion to Zabuza, the man who had spared her life, was all that kept her going. The only thing preventing Yoko from stabbing her was that. However, the fox wasn't quite so generous. Haku disappeared to assist her master by the time the demon had given Yoko more energy. Behind her stood a demon-possessed girl who had just materialized a tail of energy but had nothing to utilize it for. Yoko searched for a fresh target with red-slitted eyes that were devoid of any rationality. She located one. Haku emerged between them as Kakashi's Raikiri blazed towards the pinned Zabuza, spinning elegantly around to slash each of Kakashi's summons with a single Senbon apiece. The copy ninja attempted to halt his progress but was unable to gain any traction on the wet bridge. Kakashi was assaulted by an uncontrollable Yoko Namikaze as his lightning-covered hand continued towards Haku's twisted body. Haku grabbed her limp master's form and disappeared in a whirlpool of water as the demon jailer and her sensei fell away. In order to betray the demon of the mist and ultimately murder Tazuna the bridge builder, Gato appeared at that precise moment with an army of hired goons behind him. Sadly for him and his henchmen, what he discovered was a furious, demon-possessed Yoko who proceeded to rip the army apart like wet paper. Later, Kakashi was able to slap a supervision seal that Jiraiya had given him in case his pupil lost control. "You look like you could use a little help." A few seconds after she had placed Zabuza's lifeless body on the bed in their hiding place, the figure spoke, and Haku panicked and threw an ice senbon at her. The figure's hand became incredibly large in front of her shocked eyes before blocking the senbon. The figure removed the senbon and ground it into ice shards without showing any signs of pain. "That wasn't a very nice thing to do to one of your new benefactors, though the deal was for you to abandon Gato to the Konoha dogs that came sniffing. I suppose it doesn't matter so long as he's dead." Both heads turned to face Zabuza, who glanced up from the bed feebly. "Why you?" they said. The figure answered, "That's right," taking off his hood. "My name is Choji Akimichi, welcome to the Claw." For the first time in many years, Kurama was awake while Yoko slept at Tazuna and his family's house, oblivious to the massacre she had done. It pondered why the fourth Hokage had survived the dead demon-consuming seal contract, which is known to leave the user soulless, and why the Shinigami hadn't stolen Minato's soul in exchange for the sealing. Kurama now knew the solution. Its eyelids drifted closed in Yoko's mental prison, thinking, "At least it will be interesting." The great toad sage woke up in his sleep at Mount Myaboku, far from the civilized world. His eyes, which had been blind since the time of the Sage of Six Paths himself, looked around before his unconscious mind took over his tongue to address the empty room. The children of prophecy have begun their growth. They are destined for conflict, but conflict will let them grow to fulfill the true wish of the sage. Yin and Yang shall fight time and again, and eventually all will come to a choice. The old toad finally awoke at that moment and called out to Ma and Pa for more bugs. He didn't know what he had uttered while he was asleep or how it would affect the world. Yoko was unable to sleep. She was worn out, but it wasn't like she wasn't tired or anything. No, fear was what kept her awake. Her thoughts were plagued by the most primitive of feelings throughout the day. Since Wave, it had been that way. Work on the bridge was tripled and completed in record time following the battle on the bridge that claimed Gato's life and the lives of all his mercenaries. It was called the Bridge of Heroes in remembrance of the ninja who had defended their nation. Since many of the females who lived in Wave thought he was attractive, Sasuke had been indifferent to the attention from the locals. In the end, he had more unwelcome fangirls. Sakura told Kakashi that she felt uneasy because she hadn't accomplished much and wasn't sure how to respond to the compliments she had received. Kakashi simply accepted it all because he had previously received such acclaim. Then there was Yoko. At any other moment, she would have been ecstatic and lapped up the accolades. Not now. This time, she was unusually silent and only gave a small grin when someone complimented her. It was all due to the altercation and her actions. The actions of the Nine Tails. Yoko didn't remember much when she first woke up from the battle. All she could remember was fighting Haku before she passed out. Over the course of 2 hours, the memories returned in all their gory detail. Yoko recalled the feeling of her claws becoming longer and her fangs sharpening, the wrath and hatred that consumed her from the inside out, and, worst of all, the joy she experienced as she tore the mercenaries to pieces. Yoko recalled that she had killed Gato and all of his soldiers, and even more horrifyingly, that she had relished the experience. Under her nails, she had reveled in the murdering, the sensation of tearing off a man's arm and using it to pound his head in, and the way the skin split and tore like thin paper. Yoko had cherished the sensation of blood splattering on her clothing, in her hair, and on her face. The slaughter had delighted her. And she was repulsed by it. Her sleep was now contaminated by thoughts of the bloody mocker. Yoko had never been more appreciative of Kakashi for preventing her from continuing on to the neighboring village. But somewhere deep inside of her, something whispered that she should kill him for putting an end to her fun and stopping her rampage. She was now back in her room at home in Konoha, where the Hokage had given Team 7 a 1-week leave of absence following the Mi-Ion. That implied no training and no Mi-Ions. Her father's directives were severe in that respect. Now that it was nearly 2 in the morning, Yoko was laying in bed, fighting to keep her eyes open as her dreams were tainted by death. This was a pointless endeavor. She was worn out because she hadn't slept since she woke up in Wave 4 days prior. Her eyes slowly closed against her will. Kill, rip, tear, blood spattered the bridge, her face, and smash, maim. Her ears were filled with screams. Death, darkness. The corpses surrounded her, encroaching on her. Their sticky, chilly hands gripped her wrists. She was completely exhausted. She was surrounded by a wall of bodies that was impenetrable. They refused to allow her to pass. She would never again be free. Sucks, huh? Now you know how I feel. When Yoko's eyes opened, she saw something new. There were only a few torches surrounding a single, enormous cell in the dungeon, and the roof was hidden somewhere far up in the darkness, causing dark shadows to flee. There was just black behind the iron bars, which were made from the purest ore. There was a plain sheet of paper in place of a keyhole. Seal, it stated. Her hand suddenly stretched for it. Having fun? Yoko jerked her hand back and looked behind the bars into the darkness. Red light was shining, and a ruby orb was suspended many feet above the ground. It blinked. Yoko let out a cry. Oh, shut up, will you? The voice sounded gravelly and harsh, as though it came from a mouth that was never meant to talk. The owner emerged. Yoko's voice went out. Seriously, why is it that whenever someone sees me, they scream? I know I'm magnificent, but damn, remarked the huge fox. Its red-orange fur glistened strangely in the darkness as it sat on the floor. Behind it, 9 enormous tails swayed languidly. The enormous beast gazed boredly down at her. What? Nothing to say. After swallowing several times, Yoko choked out a phrase and said, Why you're the 9 tails? Yup, and that's the seal T that keeps you locked up. Yup, so, this is my mind, then. Yup, are you just going to keep saying, yup, whenever I ask something? She asked, her eyes narrowing. Nope. For a minute, the two gazed at one another. Yoko inquired, So, why am I here? Hell if I know. My best bet is that you focused on the source of all your pain and anguish before falling asleep. I'm honored, by the way. You're welcome, Igu. The enormous beast rested its head on its forearms and said, Huh. After days of lack of sleep, Yoko pleaded, So, can you I don't know stop these nightmares from happening? She would seize any chance to put an end to the source of her fear. The 9 tails answered, Yeah, I could, but why would I do that? Sincerely, Yoko was unable to respond appropriately. It would naturally want something. Weakly, she said, Well, because you're nice. The dungeon's walls trembled, dust dropped from the roof, and Yoko collapsed. The Nine-Tails chuckled. The demon interrupted its laughter to say, "Are you touched in the head, girl? Did your mother drop you while you suckled at her breasts, or are you just naturally stupid?" Before stopping and glaring at her. "I am the nine-tailed fox, greatest of the tailed beasts. I am a living force of nature that destroys all in my path. I kill where and when I wish, my tails weave hurricanes and death with just a wave. I leave nothing but destruction in my wake. I am hatred incarnate," it said. As one might inspect a sandwich before biting into it, the beast pressed its muzzle against the jail door, its visible eye looking deep into Yoko's soul. The pupil in the slit constricted. The creature snarled, "I am not nice." It struck the bars between them with a clenched paw. It was 4 a.m. when Yoko woke up, panting, and checked her clock. She rolled over and shut her eyes. That night, the dreams didn't bother her again. Mount Ka was agitating, its magma chamber was complete, and it was prepared to explode. Before only burning ruins remained, it was time for the typical man to leave town. It was time for Ashtown's residents to find employment. For this very reason, a team had been hired from IWA. One member had drilled into the volcano from the side using an earth jutsu, stopping just 2 yards from the chamber. His comrade was directly behind him, prepared for her part. Kuratsuchi inhaled deeply before taking off with hand seals. Lava style, fire god redirection. Magma started to slowly flow towards her and Akatsuki as they retreated from the chamber. As they emerged from the tunnel they had excavated, the 2 IWA ninja leaped aside, causing the magma to fly into the reservoir that her father, Kitsuchi, had created. The Ashtown crew wasted no time in starting the process of refining the molten, chakra-enriched substance. A crisis was avoided, and as a result, earnings would rise everywhere. Similar to Iron Country, Ashtown had officially declared neutrality soon after its founding, which meant that it was legally obligated to sell its goods to any village that inquired, regardless of location or alignment. Since they were impartial, the real Ashtown leaders were able to make a little extra money on the side without having to inform their official purchasers if some rogue ninjas and groups chose to cease buying and strike a deal. Soji Okita gave Kuratsuchi the envelope and nodded, gesturing for her team to depart as the main gate closed behind them. "On behalf of the Village Council of Ashtown, I thank you for your service, here's your payment, and I hope you have a safe journey back to IWA," she said. Soji turned around and started to make his way back to his office. He was already exhausted because the council had assigned him to handle negotiations while their delegate was in Snow Country. He went into his office, took a seat at his desk, and gave the person seated across from him a nod. "Kabuto, wasn't it?" "Yes, I thought so, sorry about the delay, but things have been pretty hectic around here. I'm Soji Okita, head of security," he said. Dressed in formal attire, including a dark gray kimono, black slacks and boots, and at least 5 concealed weapons, Kabuto stated, "Don't worry about it, I know the feeling. I understand that you wanted to negotiate for a shipment of high-quality weapons for your village. What was it called, again?" "Oko." "Oto," the ninja clarified. "I trust that price isn't an IUE here." Soji replied, leaning forward in his chair. Kabuto responded, "Of course not, even though we are a new village, we have enough private funding to set us up comfortably," as she leaned forward. "Excellent," Soji responded, putting on a serious expression. "There is only one requirement before I prepare the necessary documentation," he said. "Oh. What would that be?" inquired Kabuto, who appeared composed but was now anxious. "Don't worry, it's very simple," Soji assured him. "All we ask for, in addition to the money, is this. The other villages must never know that we were the ones to supply the forces for Odo in preparation for an attack on the Leaf. I'm positive you must be mistaken, Odo is a new village, and we would never dream." Kabuto said, his eyes widening before he quickly collected himself. Odo was created by the rogue ninja Orochimaru to provide him with servants, test subjects, and soldiers. Even now, as we speak, he is negotiating with Suna for extra manpower. "Don't worry," Soji replied when he noticed Kabuto's worried expression. "We haven't said anything, though I'm surprised that the Toad Sage hasn't found out yet. And yet, despite this knowledge, Ashtown would still trade with us. Why?" Kabuto asked, his expression as hard as stone. "Let's just say that the men and women in charge of this town don't like the Leaf any more than you do, so, shall we seal the deal?" Soji smiled and leaned in conspiratorially. He then extended his hand. It took a few seconds for Kabuto to shake it. "Excellent, now let's begin." Soji put a button on Kabuto's desk after he left his office. "Sakamoto, tell the Bow that the deal with Odo has been completed." Their envoy went home with some sharp things and a cowed mentality. The sophisticated voice of Naruto's assistant spoke over the intercom. "Great job, Soji. I'll let him know right away." Naruto Namikaze tried to gather his thoughts as he gazed out over the Mount Ka crater. Ever since Wave Country and seeing her again, feelings he had believed he had long since suppressed were resurfacing. Anger, fury, hatred, lone line. He had visited Mount Ka with his group years prior, and he could still recall all of the late evenings spent with Shikamaru, studying notes, calculations, and plans till the early hours of the morning. He recalled suppressing his emotions in order to concentrate, focusing on finishing tasks, and disregarding his emotions until the behavior became second nature. Naruto believed that he was above emotion. Yes, he still intended to get retribution, but he was positive that his feelings would no longer affect his behavior. Right now, his hands groped for imaginary weapons to fight the enemy halfway across a continent, and thoughts of her entered his dreams, leaving him wailing at night and pleading for murder. Now, every atom in his body boiled in a furious maelstrom. Naruto halted his train of thought and took a deep breath. He knew that there would be fighting and bloodshed, but he needed to exercise patience and keep the plan in mind. Their partnership with the Akatsuki organization was pushed by the plan, which also forced them to establish the Claw. Clearing a world by conflict. He would never forget the plan, and the Clockwork armor would serve as the impetus for everything. After years of preparation, Naruto Namikaze was prepared to exact revenge. However, he had to go to an exam first. Know yourself and your adversary. As the village burned, the air was filled with smoke and fire. The night was dark, seemingly portending the village's doom. She looked up in terror as her master led her and the other villagers away. The nearby castle was smoldering, having finally collapsed after standing for centuries. She heard a metallic sound, an unholy combination of the sound of swords striking and the flapping of a bird's wings, and her gaze was attracted to the castle's highest pinnacle. On the summit of the castle stood a shining monstrosity, its brilliant yellow eyes flashing red for a minute as it spread its wings. A demon intent on doing havoc, it swung its wing, pounded the air into submission, and vanished, leaving a menacing shadow against the full moon. Fourth Hokage Minato Namikaze glanced up from his paperwork to see an unexpected visitor enter his room. He looked at her and said, "Shizun, I thought you were at the gambling tournament in Tenzaku-gai with Tsunade." Like she had been trapped on the outside of an explosion, Shizen's clothes were ripped and burned, her hair was a mess, and her eyes appeared haunted. She started to sway. When Minato realized something was amiss, he rushed around his desk to seize her and lead her to a chair before she passed out. With a tone that was a mix of authority and concern, Minato questioned, "What happened?" as he motioned for one of his ANBU to get a medic. Shizun appeared to awaken from her daze as the medic arrived and started diagnosing her, grabbing him by the collar. She muttered to him, "It's gone." In an attempt to focus her attention, Minato questioned, "What do you mean? What's gone?" Shizun, an apprentice of one of the fabled Sannin, mumbled in terror, "Tenzaku Gai, it's gone." "What? How?" Ignoring the medic's frown, he reached out and grabbed Shizun by the shoulders as she was ready to pass out, shaking her slightly to try to get her attention. After muttering a single syllable, she fell into a restless slumber. Ow! It had been a long time since Naruto Namikaze had visited Konoha. In fact, he had not returned since his departure. He had vivid memories of the events leading up to his departure, including his assembling of his few friends, creating plans and designs, and watching the guard patrols until he knew their routes by heart. The night they liberated themselves, prepared to take control of their own lives and alter the course of history. As his carriage approached the main entrance of Konoha, Naruto thought, "How far we have come." He made sure his hood was up and hiding his face because the transformations that surrounded the village would be dispelled by the barrier seals. Since its founding, Ashtown has sent representatives to the Chunin exams every year, wherever they are held. According to the official narrative, they meet the shinobi sent by the 5 great nations and the other smaller nations that attend in order to determine who is deserving of a contract. Contracts with Ashtown differed from those with most shipping and weapon suppliers. Each year, Ashtown sent a letter to the countries deemed eligible for a contract, cleared their slate, and then allowed the various nations to bid on the contract over a 7-day period. At the conclusion of the period, Ashtown would select the best offer and award them a majority contract. While the losing nations would have to accept a minor contract with a smaller quantity of goods, they would not be happy about it but would accept it regardless. A majority contract meant that the winning nation would receive an increased flow of high-quality arms from the Ashtown forges. After all, some superior weapons are preferable than none at all. However, the annual exams were a good way to enter a village and blend in with the crowd, allowing operatives to take stock of the village's setup, defenses, and major landmarks. Naruto and the Claw organization had been using the exams for another purpose, but they had to exercise caution because the villages were well aware of the opportunity it presented for spies and infiltrators. In order to enable operatives to enter the village while pretending to be inspecting their defenses and ninja to determine who was deserving of the weaponry they provided, the Ashtown contract system was initially established. Although Naruto didn't often carry out the preparatory work himself, he believed that this particular instance was unique since Konoha would be one of their first targets once the plan got underway in earnest, and he wanted to watch his beloved sister fight for her life and rank during the Chunin exams. Every action has repercussions. For instance, few years ago, several of Konoha's most well-known young ninja just disappeared, leaving the teams in disarray when one or more members just disappeared. The team that might have been one of the greatest ninja legends vanished as a result, and new teams emerged to replace them among the Leaf Shinobi. Today, following years of academy training and adversity, the new genin would take to the field and start proving their value in the Chunin exams. They entered the Konoha Academy for the shinobi arts. Previously, they could have been paired with other individuals, but now they were a team committed to supporting one another. They were the best of the best, brimming with passion and fervor. Additionally, several of them were quivering somewhat from the glares they were getting from the foreign ninja who had congregated in the room. Every foreigner in the room probably had at least 10 times more experience than Kiba Inuzuka, so he couldn't help but feel a little scared. It didn't help that his dog, Akamaru, was hiding in his hoodie either. His teammate behind him was trying her hardest to blend in. Yakumo Kurama knew she wasn't the most physically threatening person in the area, so she made the decision to attempt to keep a low profile. Despite her Aikatsu ancestry, she was a fairly shy person 75% of the time. In contrast to the other members of the Konoha Genin teams, their third teammate was glaring back at the A.ambled foreigners and had successfully forced a few of them to turn away. She was an orphan who had been left on a doorstep as a baby with nothing more than a name, and she was not a member of a major clan or apparently related to impregnative ninja. Gogo Yubari, who had ripped through the Academy's records to become the strongest female genin since Kushina Uzumaki, didn't seem to be much, despite her impressive Academy scores. She looked like a typical schoolgirl, with the exception of a jacket lined with weapon pouches rather than a regular lining. Overall, Team 8 created an odd, opposing appearance that was equal parts frightening and non-intimidating. The innocent-looking schoolgirl was glaring at the entire room with enough force to knock a yak over dead. Team 9 entered the room into this. When Rock Lee and the other genin disappeared, everything was irrevocably altered. Sadly, Niji and Tenten didn't notice a significant change. When they saw the room, their teammates screamed, "How amazing! Look at all these people!" They were only able to groan and put their heads in their hands. Joni M.O., the newest of Might Guy's frightful pupils, was a tall, slender, and bald man dressed in a black suit jacket, black pants and shoes, a white shirt, a small mask that only covered his eyes, and a bow staff strapped to his back. Although he had recently been assigned to a team, Joni was significantly older than all of the genin there. The whole reason he was only now having a chance at promotion was a mystery, but he and Guy had clicked almost immediately since they had similar mindsets, and it was known to make people cry to see them get emotional and embrace. Any aspirations Niji and Tenten had of finding a typical teammate were dashed by his selection on their team. In the meantime, Team 7 had just reached the Academy's front door. The three of them had just returned from their vacation and were largely recovered from their adventure in Wave Country, which had ended in a one-sided, Ninetales-fueled acre. Sakura needed some therapy to get over seeing her teammate kill everyone on the bridge, while Sasuke needed some alone time after having flashbacks to the night of the Uchiha acre. Although Yoko Namikaze, their comrade, wasn't entirely sure she was prepared for the examinations, she wanted to put on a strong front and support her friends and teammates in reaching their objectives. She had only just started having dreams about that day because of the nine-tailed fox inside of her. She had strapped the stinger to her arm before leaving the house, as she had come to call it. Her brother, whom she had not even realized existed before then, had given her the gift, which had many people wondering how he got it. All this time, where had he been? What took place that evening? Yoko's goal was to learn the truth about her brother and everyone else who had disappeared. However, while young, talented ninja from all over the nation banded together to risk everything for a promotion, other forces took even more sinister actions. For instance, the Orochimaru forces, who had just acquired weapons from the best forges in the shinobi world, started to unite with their new Suna comrades. The Red Dawn were ready to begin the initial stages of their plans in the distant land of Rain. Additionally, the Claw tightened globally. Kiri, the hidden village of mist and a location with a bloody past, was one example of this tightening grip. Unlike many other villages, Kiri was still recovering from the end of a successful rebellion, so they were unable to send any genin to the Chunin exams this year. The village couldn't risk sending forces out and leaving the village undefended due to a lack of manpower, even after both sides of the bloodline conflict had merged together. Naturally, history has repeatedly demonstrated that when the ruling class lacks personnel, there is always space for darker elements to enter the picture. In reality, a number of those components were coming together. Choji Akimichi of the Claw organization was meeting with one of the most powerful figures in the Kiri underground in a dimly lit room with only one naked light bulb. The Konohamaru Corps was at his side, and they had been explicitly told to keep quiet during the entire meeting because the man they were meeting with was not someone they wanted to irritate with the Corps' attempts to be hip. When the door opened, 8 burly men entered and took up positions along the walls. They made no noise and were all tough and muscular, with their hair cropped close to their heads so that they all looked nearly the same. Knives of various kinds were hidden in different pockets, though some wore them outwardly. 3 more figures entered when the door opened again. 2 of them were dressed similarly to the other 8 figures, with the exception that they wore flak jackets over their black shirts. The jackets were torn and scarred from years of use and abuse, and one of them had a sword strapped to his waist and the other a bow and quiver slung over his shoulder. In contrast to his monochromatic bodyguards, the third figure was significantly different from the others. To begin with, he was roughly a full head and shoulders shorter than his guards. He was also dressed in a dark green jacket and a yellow shirt, with a pair of black sandals on his feet. He preferred a longer cut, but not too long, and had a lot more hair than his guards. His hair was mostly a deep red, with a fine silver finish at the ends, which revealed he was older than the other persons in the room. But it was his face that really made him stand out from the others. It was wrinkled but set like stone, with no lines from laughter or smiles, indicating a hard lifestyle. His brown eyes were enlarged by the glasses he wore, giving the impression that he looked at the world through microscopes, examining every detail to see how well he could take advantage of it. Every criminal, no matter how big or small, deferred to this man, who was the driving force behind Kiri's underground elements. Nothing happened in this hamlet without his knowledge, and everything was done under his supervision. He didn't carry any weapons since he didn't need them. Everyone called him by his chosen moniker, which was used to mock him in his youth before he adopted it for himself and made it frightening, thus his name was lost since no one knew it, and if they did, they dared not mention it. All of them referred to him as Brick Top. The most powerful criminal in Kiri just stared at Choji and his companions for a minute without saying anything. After that, he clapped his hands and moved aside as some thugs brought in a table and 2 chairs. The furniture was promptly set up, and the thugs fled. Brick Top only motioned for Choji to sit, which he did. After they were both sitting apart, he clapped his hands once more. This time, only one person entered the room with a tray filled with a kettle, sugar cubes, and exactly 1 teacup. He set the tray down on the table and hurried out of the room, briefly ignoring his guests. Brick Top made his perfect cup of tea using a series of fast, practiced movements, and before he drank it, he held it out to the sword-wielding guard, who swiftly made a series of hand signals and used a jutsu that Choji believed was to check for poisons. Brick Top sighed in relief after taking a sip of the tea, satisfied that everything was in order in the cup. He kept drinking, taking a few more sips until the cup was empty. He set the teacup down, almost in mourning that it was empty, and then he looked up at Choji, who had been suitably silent during the entire conversation. Brick Top said, "Well, What'ya got to tell me that's so fucking important, with a thick, odd accent that no one had ever been able to trace back. Choji cleared his throat and started talking. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, sir. I understand that you have a busy schedule, and dash. Bricktop interrupted him as he went to get more tea from the kettle, saying, you bet your fucking A, my schedule's busy. I'm me, in my afternoon pig feed in fair this, so make it quick, boy. Knowing exactly what Bricktop meant by pig feeding, Choji modified his strategy after biting off the statement he had begun. As you wish, sir, my organization is planning on setting up a bizine, in Kiri, and we would like your help in getting it off the ground. Why come tell me about this? I'm not exactly a fucking realtor, EAD down to the street and you'll find a decent real estate office, lots of pretty women too, Bricktop said, pausing as he was adding sugar cubes to the teacup. He stroked his chin and stared at Choji for a moment. Well sir, this bizine, my organization and I have in mind isn't exactly 100% legal, replied Choji. Well of course it isn't, boy. In the future, just spit it you and cut to the chase for I get annoyed. Now, wha is it, and why should I help you? Bricktop responded. Choji pulled out a set of designs for Bricktop to review. What we are doing, sir, is opening a new nightclub down by the docks. We plan on attracting sailors, dock workers, ninja, and all sorts of people there, Choji explained. Well, I'm a fucking architect, but that looks right and proper, however, I still fail to see where I come into this picture, boy, he said after taking a while to study the drawings before setting them aside and taking a sip of tea. Choji remarked, true, sir, the reason I am here before you is because of this, while placing a little bag packed with red substance on a clear plastic table. Bricktop gave it a quick, questioning glance before making a small hand gesture. The guard with the bow then picked up the bag and studied it over for a minute. After sniffing it, he closed it and put it back down. Ain't no drug I've seen before, Bo, and I've seen 'em all, smelled like seasonin', stated the security officer. Bricktop turned back to Choji after saying, thank you, Tomatsu. So, what the fuck is it, eh? I've seen my fair share of powder before, and I haven't seen one like that Ithea, he said. Choji added a bag to his pocket. We call it Mendosupesu, something of our own creation. It passes all standard drug tests, and is virtually harmless. However, the stuff tends to stay in your system for a while, and it has an interesting effect on people. Oh. And pray tell, what might that effect be? Bricktop said, leaning forward. Looking up from his notes, Shikamaru asked, are you ready, Ag? He responded, yes sir, as he completed fastening the final pieces of the outfit. Shikamaru reached out and turned on a tape recorder, saying, all right, remember not to move too much at first this time, I don't want to build another suit again. The suit's wings, which are a miniature version of those on the Clockwork armor, have been improved with an additional chakra thruster on the bottom of each wing. This is where the radial, ulnar, and metacarpus all join in a bird's wing. Additionally, as an extra safety feature, a tensile, fireproof fabric has been stretched between the individual, phalanx, components of the wings to allow limited gliding in the event of thruster failure. The finished product will also have a built-in parachute. Additional control flaps have been placed on the back of the suit's thighs in order to facilitate more controlled maneuvers. The chakra batteries have been fully charged and the joints have been greased with a special, non-flammable non-freezing oil that I have created in order to increase movement and flexibility. All that remains is to test this version of the suit in terms of maneuverability and flight duration, a 4-inch thick cable has been attached to the suit to prevent accidental acceleration past testing parameters. AG, you may proceed. The burned man took a deep breath, put on a pair of goggles, and then pressed a button on the stomach of the suit to activate the thrusters. The wings that were strapped to his shoulder blades by the cables and seals of the suit flared out in response to his arm movement, and he started to slowly rise into the air. He rose about 5 feet off the ground before shifting his arms once more, which caused his ascent to stop and leave him hovering in place. AG did some maneuvers to get a feel for the suit, and then slowly lowered himself back to the ground. "How are you feeling?" As Shikamaru got ready to take notes, he inquired. "Well, those extra thrusters definitely helped get airborne faster, and the back flaps did help maneuverability considerably, but they have to be able to work simultaneously without me manually changing them individually. Also, I think we need to change the ignition button to a different location. The stomach is too much of an obvious target," AG said as he took off his suit and placed it on a rack that was customized. "I see what you're getting at. I'll crunch some numbers and come up with something. Suit 7B should work a lot better." Shikamaru put his notebook away. "Before you go, AG, I have one last thing for you to test." "Oh. Has the weapon been completed?" In response to AG's question, Shikamaru reached behind him and removed a tarp from a workbench. "It's just a prototype, but it should be effective. The seals on it convert your chakra into a fire-style form, and at fully power it should have the effectiveness of a great fireball jutsu. Take a look for yourself," Shikamaru said as AG carefully picked up the weapon. A number of training dummies materialized from the ground as Shikamaru pressed a button. AG took precise aim, directed his chakra into the weapon, and squeezed the trigger when he was ready. Only ashes and some scorched wood remained after the massive gout of flame blasted out of the weapon's barrel and burst against the targets. Looking down at the blazing weapon, the burned man, "Oh, this is nice." Shikamaru only smiled and made more notes while AG bragged about his new tool. "Yes, Firefly," he thought. As the exams got underway, genin sat at desks in rows and faced their first task, the fearsome paper exam. Since it had already eliminated 1/3 of the competitors, it was worthy of the attention. The proctors called out the eager, youthful ninjas for their less than subtle attempts at cheating, sending them out of the room in shame. While Kumo's representatives were carefully reflecting light off their partially sheathed blades in a series of signals, one member of the IWA team was eyeing the only Hyuga in the room. On the other end of the spectrum, the more advanced genin were cheating with skill and finesse. An IWA team had discreetly scattered pebbles across the floor, and their smarter teammate was forming them into answers for her allies. Speaking of, the different members of Konoha's team Guy used a variety of communication methods. Niji could simply use his Byakugan to see the answers. Ten used a series of strategically placed mirrors to observe her surroundings, and Joni Mo was silently tapping his staff on the floor while communicating with his teammates in a set of specialized code. Akamaru, Kiba's dog, was sitting on his head and silently growling the answers to his partner. Unbeknownst to the other competitors, a strong Gainjutsu had covered a nearby proctor to divert his attention, and Yakumo Kurama sneaked a peek at her neighbor's tests. Gogo, their third teammate, was merely writing on her paper without even trying to cheat. The proctors assumed she was just intelligent enough to understand the answers. She was sketching instead. Filling in the answers was a breeze for Team 7 since Sakura Haruno, who was exceptionally talented in the brains department despite her relative lack of skills, had an intriguing but relatively simple time of it. After unlocking his Sharingan during the combat on Wave Country's bridge, Sasuke Uchiha merely exploited his newfound ability to cheat by mimicking Sakura's wrist movements. Their third teammate, Yoko Namikaze, was unable to pass this test because she lacked a Sharingan and a highly developed intellect. Instead, she had to use other espionage techniques. A transformed shadow clone, disguised as a spider, was attached to the ceiling above another table. After seeing everything it needed, the spider dispersed in a tiny puff of smoke that caused some proctors to look up. Although she would have been expelled if she had taken the test alone, the proctors were unable to identify the clone maker and could not administer punishment. Yoko, who had been informed of the shadow clone's secret when she had first begun her training, was given the transferred knowledge by the dispelled clone. She smiled as she hastily typed out the answers and awaited the final question. After spending the last hour observing the candidates in this year's Chunin exams, Minato Namikaze withdrew his hands from the crystal ball he used for the telescope technique. Since the technique depended on locking onto the target's chakra signature, he had switched between Ibiki Marino, the head proctor for the first exam, and his daughter, Yoko. He was well acquainted with their chakra signatures, having worked with one for years and raised the other since infancy. He watched the window break due to an odd missile thrown by Anko Mitarashi just before he cut the image off to go have lunch. It wasn't his concern, and he wished the unfortunate genin well. After finishing his papers, he went to get a Chiraka ramen from his office. The Hokage monument had been attacked by steel-tipped claws, the academy was on fire, the cries within were fading away, the hospital was already reduced to cinders, and his nightmares were full of horror and destruction. On top of the Hokage tower, a shadowy figure stood with metal wings beating the air into submission behind him. He had succeeded. He had triumphed. All he had ever desired was finally his, and he had crushed all opposition. Hold on, the wings were meant to belong to him, he was supposed to control them. Why, therefore, weren't they obeying his commands? He turned around slowly. He was stopped in his tracks by a pair of bright yellow eyes that peered into his soul. The enormous, monstrous beak sprang open and sprang forward. He cried out. When he woke up, Naruto was still shouting. Sweating and bare-chested, he flung off the cover and sat up in his hotel room, grateful that he had installed seals to soundproof the space before bed. Like the others, this nightmare is also a fake one. The armor belongs to me and cannot be controlled by anybody else. His body had adapted to the point where it desired heat, and anything other than scorching temperatures hardly impacted him anymore. He shuddered a little because years of being around the hot lava of Mount Ka had changed his tolerance for temperature. The pleasant environment of Konoha felt a little chilly to him. Well, I need to gather myself. Perhaps I should accept Ino's offer of a mind scan the next time she's at headquarters. When Naruto looked at the time, he noticed that it was about noon. He estimated that the second exam would begin shortly, but, like the first, he had little interest in watching it. Since it was expected of any good ninja to be knowledgeable about information gathering and survival training, Naruto decided not to watch the first two exams. Instead, he was much more interested in the third exam because it would allow him to see the young ninja in action. He wanted to watch their moves to get a sense of the next generation of ninja from around the world. To put it simply, he sought to determine who posed a threat and who wasn't worth the trouble. If there were preliminary bouts, Naruto would try to attend them during his 5 days of waiting. If not, he would either return to Ashtown for the month or find a reason to stay in Konoha and continue his observations. After getting dreaded, Naruto grabbed the room's key seal, turned off the array of seals, and checked that his own chakra surper ing seal was active. He put on a disguise and ventured out into the street, determined to find out what had changed in the years since his last visit. Naruto paused for a moment and inhaled deeply, relishing the scent of air free of ash. Not yet, anyhow. Minato had just settled into his desk with a meticulously prepared bowl of Ichiraku ramen takeaway for his lunch break when one of the proctors rushed in and said, "Lord Hokage, Orochimaru is here." When the fabled fourth Hokage of the Hidden Leaf choked on his lunch and the broth poured all over his recently finished paperwork, he nearly lost an epic battle against a mouthful of noodles. He gasped out commands, his eyes tearing and his voice hoarse. "Where is he? How are you aware?" "Anko found bodies with me ing faces on the edge of training ground 44, she's already gone ahead to find him, sir." "Damn, the one time I can't go after him personally is when he chooses to show up," Minato said, slamming his fist into his desk. "Sir?" the proctor asked, bewildered. Minato exhaled. "This is the Chunin exams, an international event that follows international rules. Right now, the second exam, featuring genin from Acro, the continent, is underway in that forest. If I go in there, or send forces to capture or kill Orochimaru, and he escapes, we would have no proof that we weren't interfering in the exams in favor of our village. It could spark an international incident that could lead to war if we don't catch him." He groaned and wiped some of the remaining broth from his chin before turning to gaze out the window at the hamlet. "Send in the ANBU to flush him out, make sure the foreign genin don't see them, that would be just as bad." The proctor exclaimed, "Yes sir," and hurried out of the room. He felt the burden of responsibility as he gazed out at the community he had vowed to defend years before. "Yoko, please be careful." He then returned to his workstation and started to feel hopeless when he saw the documents coated in soup that he would now need to rewrite. This episode was mentally added by Minato to the list of offenses done by Orochimaru. The guy who had ambushed her team had taken off his disguise as a Kusa genin and exposed himself to be Orochimaru, the fabled rogue Sannin, sending Yoko flying with a single hit, sending her reeling with fear. Orochimaru was at the top of the list, along with the bounty hunter Kakuzu, legendary Adata.in Oren Ishii, several members of Kiri's Seven Swordsmen, and a few other names. Yoko was the first to acknowledge that she wasn't the best at remembering faces or facts, but her parents had taken the time to drill the faces, names, and basic information of several of the world's more notorious rogue ninja. They had met Sabuza Momochi, a member of that distinguished list, in Wave Country. She had never imagined encountering even one name from that list, much less two, especially when she was still a genin. Yoko had swiftly decided that standing around in a terrified stupor was not beneficial to anyone and was actually making her a more desirable target. So, she straightened up, pulled some kunai out of her pouch, and leaped into battle. The Hokage's daughter was promptly flung back again from a kick that she barely blocked, while in midair, Yoko pointed her arm at the enemy and fired the scorpion at him. The snake ninja caught the blade between two fingers and pulled, yanked off her feet. Yoko was pulled into another kick, this time one she couldn't block. She crumpled to the ground, wheezing. Orochimaru lived up to his reputation. He saw through all of their maneuvers despite their best efforts. Sasuke had been lauded by the academy as a prodigy like his brother, but the seasoned older ninja had no difficulties handling them. Orochimaru didn't make fun of them. Instead, he spoke as though he were merely stating a fact. "I'm disappointed. It seems that both the academy and your sensei have failed you three. You can't even hope to lay a finger on me," he said, not even breaking stride as he delivered a lightning-fast kick to Sasuke's stomach, sending him flying. When he landed roughly, the boy rolled over and started to gobble up his lunch. To Yoko's dismay, the renegade ninja spat out a sword from his throat and proceeded to approach Sakura, who was slumped against a tree, paralyzed by a combination of fear and gainjutsu. "Pathetic, this is the best I can expect from Minato's daughter and Itachi's brother." I should just kill you all right now for being so pathetic and weak, he said. Yoko became enraged, stretching its legs, the 9 tails. As she gave over the desired bouquet of white lilies, the florist remarked, "Thank you, and have a good day." The elderly guy who had requested a distance grinned warmly and thanked her, leaving behind a bit more than was necessary. The elderly man hobbled out of the Yamanaka flower shop with the bouquet in his hand and started to make his way slowly toward a cemetery. The extra ANBU on the roofs he passed by didn't give him any attention because, after all, his chakra was hardly civilian level and his movements resembled those of a man suffering from the last stages of arthritis. When the elderly guy arrived to the cemetery, he went up to a memorial stone that was a little off the usual route. It was a straightforward marker with simply a name and the image of a whirlpool churning. Uzumaki Daike's. The cries that flooded his head gave way to memories that were hidden as the elderly man cautiously knelt down and laid the flowers on the grave. The room was a deep, warm crimson, with tapestries and old animal skins hanging on the walls, an earthy brown carpet on the floor, a burning fireplace on one wall, and the scent of smoke and flowers on a little table next to his chair. "Grandpa? Are you awake?" His violet eyes were as bright as ever, even if his hair had gone from scarlet to gray. He sat up in his cozy recliner and leaned forward to gaze at his grandson, who was wearing a gleaming new forehead protector with pride. A broad smile filled the grandfather's face. He brought his favorite grandchild in for an embrace, holding him tight for a few seconds before extending his arms to have a good look at him. "You did it. Look at ya. I bet you could take on the whole world right now," he screamed. He said joyfully, "I knew you would, Pa. Never had a doubt," before coughing. His grandson started to worry and rushed over him like a mother bird in defense. "Careful, Grandpa. Don't exert yourself." "The doctors said dash." The old man dismissed his grandson's worries by saying, hell with the doctors. I walked through a world war. I know my body better than those simpering wimps." He sat back in his recliner and adjusted the blanket over his legs. His grandson drew up a chair beside him after stoking the fireplace, which caused a flurry of embers to rise up the chimney. Those were the days, my boy," the elderly guy remarked as he settled in. Medics in those days had a pair and didn't try to soften the news with phrases like, "You may feel a pinch," or, "The odds are in your favor." You got the news straight from the source. The child rolled his eyes and mumbled, "Yes, Grandpa," after hearing this spiel at least 20 times since the sickness started. The grandfather went for a cup of his favorite sake and said plainly, "I know the score, boy, unli, Tsunade comes back and miracles something out of her I ain't long for the world." "Grandpa, I am aware of that. All I want is to." "I know, my boy, I accepted death a long time ago on the battlefield. I never thought I would die at home in bed back in those days. I hoped, of course, but I never thought it would happen." The elderly gentleman, his eyes no longer now, "My enemies called me the Ayumi Ku Erisher, the storm that walks. I earned that nickname by walking through my enemies like how the hurricane tears through trees and land. I broke the siege of Kurakan and avenged Yuzushio, and my reward is to die, 'cause of some incurable bloody sickness," he spat out, almost with rage. "Grandpa, would you do it again?" the child asked softly, voicing his ideas aloud without realizing it. "Was it?" "Speak up," urged the man. The youngster repeated, louder this time, "I asked if you would do it over again if you had to, Grandpa." "What kind of question is that?" the elderly man asked, laughing. "Of course I would." To the boy's surprise, his grandfather had always talked about the war with regret and bitterness, but now he claimed that if given the chance, he would do it again. Why? I assumed you detested the war. With a tone of bewilderment, he inquired. The old man's gaze drifted to the fireplace mantel, where a sheathed katana was placed in a place of honor. A forehead protector with a whirlpool etched into it was draped over the sheath. "'Cause if I hadn't done all those things, gone through the hell that I did, the ones I loved wouldn't have been saved from the bloodshed," he said. The seal emblazoned on the blade's hilt matched the one on the old man's hand. "I don't have many regrets, kiddo," the elderly man sighed. How would history have unfolded if Madara had defeated Hashirama, or if they had never engaged in combat? Would Konoha be the same village it is today? If Uzushio had never fallen, would you and I still be here? Even now, as I become older, I wonder how different our world would be if there were no chakra and if the sage had never been born. "Come on, Grandpa," the boy sneered. "You are just 89. You still have many years to live." "Ha," the granddad laughed. "If only," he groaned, leaning back in his chair, "I may be an Uzumaki, but I can feel it in my bones, and I don't have much left in me. I will say one thing, kiddo, nothing changes in this world without blood. I learned that after Uzushio fell, when Konoha was enraged and went to war with those they had previously pushed for peace with. I saw it firsthand when your pop's ma anchored the enemy in a yellow flash. Remember that, kiddo, bloodshed changes everything." The elderly man got up, stretched his back, and tightly grasped his cane as he started to leave. Naruto Namake's face remained expressionless beneath the mask, but for a single tear that trickled down his cheek. His determination was reinforced, and he was now more certain than ever that the course he had chosen was the correct one. His mind's chatter was quieted. For the moment, Yoko's mind was racing, and all she could see were flashes of light and sound. She knew that he was unconscious, but she couldn't seem to shake the sleep no matter how hard she tried. She drifted in an odd, colorless emptiness. She recalled using the power of the 9 tails to charge her body and leap at Orochimaru. He immediately backhanded her and slammed her into a tree before slapping her stomach with some sort of seal. The sudden loss of power and the pain caused her to lose consciousness, and the last thing she saw was her enemy's neck suddenly lengthening, sending his head flying in Sasuke's direction. Yoko was pulled into a recollection that was not her own as a flurry of color and light. There had already been a lot of fighting, and the battlefield was bloodied and scarred. Armored troops were fighting to keep the line against their terrible opponent. Their godfather was relying on them to succeed. Another wave of the enemy was approaching, but this time there were too many of them. Their yellow eyes and pale green skin were highlighted by the sun's fading light, and their tail blades glinted with silent threat. Thousands of them, their defensive lines started to sag. A glimmer of light appeared in the sky, and lightning bolts struck the enemy advance from above. The men raised a ragged cheer, for their god had arrived. With her white eyes seeing everything, the god hovered over the battlefield, her skin pallid in the scarlet sunset. The ground started to tremble, so the men stopped celebrating. They turned to see a fresh group of enemy soldiers charging toward them, but this time they were being led by someone named God, who was ready to engage in combat again as the challenger came up holding a staff of green-flamed thorns. Poisonous yellow eyes met pale white ones. With a gasp, Yoko was jerked from the memories, stumbling to her feet and gripping her stomach. She caught a glimpse of Sakura coming in her direction out of the corner of her eye as Sasuke lay motionless on the ground, a strange seal covering his neck. For a minute, those toxic yellow eyes flickered in her consciousness before disappearing. The 9 tails tried to smash through the cage deep inside the seal, but it was repelled. Snarling, it scoffed as it saw the newly arrived seal. This 5-element seal was not comparable to the artwork that a toddler might create on the wall after being given unsupervised access to crayons, markers, and paint, in contrast to the Reaper Death seal that confined it. The Nine-Tails took a seat and started to think about the memory it had seen. It was clear that it wasn't the girl's recollection, and it was at least somewhat likely that it had never seen that battlefield and those monsters in its lengthy life. After ruling out the apparent solutions, it was presented with a choice that left it perplexed and rather alarmed. Could it be that it was a recollection of the time when the Nine were one, when it was a part of a much more powerful monster? It would need to give this more thought and perhaps check to see if any other recollections came to mind. He had just finished recompleting the paperwork after spilling his ramen broth all over it, so when someone knocked on his door, Minato looked up and made sure everything was put away correctly this time inside his desk before answering. Confident that he wouldn't have to redo his work a third time, he called out, "Enter." Tsunade of the Sannin, the best doctor the ninja world had ever seen, entered his office. Her once calm facade had vanished, leaving behind a weary, haunted appearance. Her clothing was ripped and burned, and her face was stained with ash. She almost flung a bottle of sake onto the desk as she sank into the chair. Minato started to go for the cups he kept hidden, but he shouldn't have bothered. Tsunade literally tore out the cork with her teeth and started downing the bottle. This is not encouraging, Minato thought anxiously. She emptied the bottle and tossed it in the direction of the trash bin, not giving a damn if it ended up there. Then she took out another bottle and did it again. "Hell of a few days, Minato, hell of a few days," she muttered after completing the second bottle. "What happened, Tsunade?" Minato inquired, clearing his throat, having last heard her this defeated shortly after Nawaki's death. "I was on a winning streak and that damn bird showed up and killed everyone. Now Tenzaku guy is gone completely," she said, before pulling out a third bottle from somewhere. "A giant fucking metal owl tore the roof off and everything went to hell, Minato. That's what happened." "So, did it say anything when it attacked?" was the next question Minato dared to ask after waiting until the bottle was emptied. Smash! The fourth Hokage felt something inside him shrivel and die at the sight of his recompleted paperwork smashed and shredded all over the place. Tsunade yelled, "No, it didn't say anything. All it did was laugh," before removing her fist from what had been Minato's desk. Then her words caught his attention. "Tell me everything that happened," Minato said, grabbing a scrap of paper and a piece of his desk to use as a solid base to write on. "Laughed? It just laughed. Nothing else?" he asked for confirmation. Her nod caused him to frown. "All previous encounters report it taunting and swearing to bring about death. Strange," he said. A huge claw ripped through the ceiling, making a terrible sound like metal tearing through wood. The roof vanished in a matter of seconds, leaving behind a metal fiend right out of hell and a starry night sky. Following years of intuition, Tsunade grabbed the opponent and threw him behind her. She then knocked the table over, scattering poker chips everywhere, and slashed out at the clawed foot. Her renowned strength seemed to do little more than leave a dent as the foot moved and knocked her back a few feet. The wind from the giant wing beats caused her hair to blow back as she stood up, and when she looked up, she froze at the sight of blood. The beast had seized another player, squeezing him like a child would his action figures, and with a terrible squelching sound, the player's head exploded in a shower of blood, brain, and bone matter. One brown, terrified eye landed at her feet. Tsunade stood motionless due to her horror of blood. The owl looked at her for a moment before concluding she posed no threat and left through the ceiling hole, knocking her over in the process. Tsunade lost sight of the blood and started to panic, sprinting out the door onto Tenzakugai's main square and coming across a Mammoker. The metal beast circled the town from above, picking off easy targets while the wooden houses burnt and people fled back and forth, screaming. It threw a guy into a blazing tower, briefly igniting the flames. The archer was ineffectively firing arrows when the owl turned around and grabbed him from the roof of another building. He was bitten in half, and the lower half of his body dropped at her feet. The owl laughed a menacing metal sound and kept searching for victims. Something was different. Years of instincts developed on the battlefield started to kick in, and the screams of the innocents around her and the pounding of blood through her veins started to overcome the fear. At first, Tsunade froze again, the blood forcing her back to the deaths of Dan and Nawaki. With tremendous effort, Tsunade overcame her dread and sealed her palm, activating the Een seal on her forehead. With the seal's help, she jumped up and caught the owl by its metal tail feathers as it circled back around. The owl collapsed to the ground, thrashing and trying to right itself straight away, but Tsunade wasn't finished yet. She grunted as she threw the enormous bird into Tenzakugai's meeting hall, which was already on fire like the rest of the town. The owl was buried in a pile of blazing wood as the already shaky timbers gave way under its weight. Tsunade remained vigilant, and indeed, the owl swiftly pushed its way out of the destroyed structure. It stood on the ground for a while, gathering its courage, and gave her a yellow glare, though she believed she saw a hint of red around the edges of those glowing eyes. The monster lifted its wings and flew into the air once more, but this time it did not come back. With one metal feather in her hand and its edges piercing her skin, Tsunade slightly lowered her defenses. Behind her, she heard, "Lady Tsunade." The slug prince turned to see Shizun racing toward her from a distance, Tauntaun nestled behind her arm, and blood streaming from a wound on her forehead. This time, for once, Tsunade was completely unaffected by the blood. Tsunade placed the feather on the remains of Minato's desk with a clatter. He then picked it up and turned it over in his hands for examination. The fourth Hokage's trained eyes saw hundreds of intricate small seals engraved on it, each one imperfectly blending with the others. "I barely recognize a quarter of these seals," he grumbled to himself. "I may be a seal master, but this is beyond me. Do you know anyone who could made something like this, Tsunade?" "No, maybe one of the old Uzushio masters could have come up with something like this, but their secrets vanished with the Uzumaki clan during the war," Tsunade said, sighing as she tried to have another sip after noticing the bottle was already empty. With his eyes still on the feather, Minato nodded absently, "Yeah," then looked up at Tsunade, assessing her appearance before saying, "You should go get some rest and check on your apprentice." She said, "You won't hear any arguments from me," and then got up to go. Minato sat back and thought about it after writing a letter to Jiraiya requesting that he return to the hamlet. Who could have created such a strong and intricate sealing matrix?